أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. These were the same verses from Surah Hashr that I recited at the opening of the Blessed Are the Strangers film screening at the Andalus Centre in Glasgow. It was the very first time in my community for a woman to be heard reciting the Qur'an in front of a diverse audience of Muslims and non-Muslims. After the event, Abdul Haq Bewley came up to me and commented on the recitation that he had just heard. Bewley is the husband of Aisha Bewley, and together they had translated the Qur'an into English. So he came up to me and told me, "That was very pure. Thank you." It's notable to me that Bewley's comments focused on the purity of the recitation of the Qur'an, rather than whether the reciter was a male or a female. It was about the pureness, the sincerity, and the meaning of the recitation, rather than the person themselves. It took someone who was a convert to Islam to tell me this. Other scholars in attendance remained quiet and did not say anything. It is interesting to observe that when a male recites the Qur'an, everyone has something positive to say, but when a female recites, they remain quiet. There is silence, whether it be online or in person. People who are really connected with the Qur'an can see the beauty of the Qur'an in terms of its purity and sincerity. When Abdul Haq Bewley and Aisha Bewley were translating the Qur'an together, they listened to the Arabic recitation and followed along with the English to get the meaning and to see how sincere their translation was to the Arabic text. The people who are truly connected to the Qur'an do not criticize it when it's recited. They simply appreciate it for its meaning and for the sincerity of the recitation. The Qur'an was sent for all of mankind, not just for Muslims. So, of course, the beauty of the Qur'an can reach the hearts of other people too. And I realized this myself when I was invited to share a recitation of Qur'an at St. Mary's Cathedral in Glasgow in 2017. So after my recitation of Qur'an that evening, I didn't know quite what to expect. I didn't know how the Christian congregation who had most likely never heard the Qur'an being recited before, how they would react and respond. I didn't have any expectations. And after the event and the service ended, I was really heartened and touched by the response. Many members of the congregation came up to me and shook my hand to thank me and tell me how moved they were. Some said that they had tears in their eyes and that the Qur'an had reached their souls. Debbie White wrote, "It was a real privilege to be here to witness this. One of the most moving experiences I've had." Beth said, "The story of Mary and Jesus from the Qur'an was a privilege to witness. Such a moving moment at the cathedral. Surely the angels were among us." And these were people who were part of the congregation and who were there on that same night. Outside of the cathedral, however, there was a controversy about the recital. Evangelical groups based in America were outraged that a girl could stand at the front of the cathedral and have her voice heard. These exact same Quranic verses had been recited before in services and even with an English translation, and no outcry had happened. Is it because the recitation was given by a young woman? Clearly it was one factor, as it was a common theme that came up in some of the abuse. The Muslim community at that time remained quiet, while the story reached all corners of the world and was circulated amongst far-right groups. There was even a protest against the event here in London. The story reached Rebel News, Breitbart, and the like. You name it, the story was told. Nevertheless, the beautiful response from the congregation within the cathedral was touching, and that's what I remembered. I have since built a very good relationship with the Christian community there. As someone who was there, I'd like to see it acknowledged that many of us found it a profoundly moving and powerful experience. I was there, and it was a beautiful sharing of ministries, done with sensitivity and understanding. It was also an occasion of great joy, love, and friendship. It shows you the power of the feminine spiritual, and so the importance of standing in that power and letting the divine work through you in this way. She has my admiration for her controversial recitation of the Qur'an. Spirituality of pure heart. Now, when I received comments and messages from the Muslim community regarding my video of the recital, it became clear to me that many Muslims were focusing merely on irrelevant external factors and everything other than the message itself. Great, but if you remove shoes, that would be much better. For some reason, I got a lot of comments about shoes. Please avoid reciting with shoes on in future. This is surely a mockery of our deen. There is actually no point in reciting the Qur'an in the church by this girl. Please, read it from your heart, not to mock my deen. It's so important to see women engaging with the Qur'an in many different ways, whether as reciters, as scholars, as commentators, because Islam and the Qur'an is for everyone. It's for mankind, not just for men. It is clear, therefore, that we need more books and studies on the Qur'an by women, and we need more female reciters. Why is it that there are mainly books by males in our scholarship, and how often do we hear the Qur'an recited in public by someone who is not a man? If our interpretations of God's book are only from a male viewpoint, then that is quite problematic. In modern times, we can now see some more female authors, but most of the classical work is by males. And it's really vital that male scholars should be reading and engaging with the work of female scholars. The feminine spiritual is powerful, as members of the congregation said. There's a great importance and need for women to stand in that power and allow the divine to be heard. This is this is one of my favorite tweets I received, just to show you the importance of having female role models and women in our scholarship. It can really be inspiring towards our young people. So when I was in the Balkans on the CNS summer school with a diverse group of young Muslims from across Europe, we were on long bus journeys, traveling from Bar to Podgorica. We were singing songs and nasheeds together and traditional Bosnian songs on our journey. And I was invited by the organizer to recite some Qur'an.
إن الساعة آتية أكاد أخفيها لتجزى كل نفس بما تسعى فلا يصدنك عنها من لا يؤمن بها واتبع هواه فتردى وما تلك بيمينك يا موسى قال هي عصاي أتوكأ عليها وأهش بها على غنمي ولي فيها مآرب أخرى.
So you can hear the bus in the background.
قال ألقها يا موسى.
Now, as I was reciting at the very front of the bus on very windy roads, one Turkish participant wrote a note on his phone, and he handed his phone over to the organisers. And the message said, that it was not right for a woman to recite the Qur'an in front of men. So later, when I was discussing the matter with the organizers of the program, one of them told me that his wife, Shahida Jahanovic Ilic, is actually a very accomplished reciter of Qur'an in the Balkans. And she is known for winning many, many competitions. And in fact, most of the winners of the competitions are women. When I was in the Ghazi Huzrov Beg Mosque, there happened to be a ceremony for a number of young people at the time that I was there. Some of them were women who had finished memorizing the Qur'an. But it was noticeable that the women appeared to be reluctant to come forward and sit at the front of the mosque, as the front area was filled with men. The Imam went over to them and encouraged them to come forward. It was as if he had to be the one to say that it's important for you to be here and that you belong here, and showing people that women belong in the mosque. Also, during my travels, I visited the Islamic Center and Bar in Montenegro. And I recited the Qur'an with my friends in the main prayer area.
الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما والذين يبيتون لربهم سجدا وقياما والذين يقولون ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم.
In response to this, I received a comment questioning, why is her back to the Qibla? And why is a woman reciting loudly in the main hall of the masjid? My question is, why are people behaving and responding in such a manner? This may be due to people's cultural upbringing and what they're used to becoming what is right for them. When I look at how the Christian and non-Muslim audience perceive the Quranic recitation that I did in the Cathedral, it's clear that they did not have the same baggage of gender that Muslims have become obsessed with. To hear sacred knowledge through the voice of a woman had an effect on them, and it deepened their respect for Muslim women. I came across some very early recordings of Qur'an recitation, and I found it a very special experience to listen to. When you hear the beauty of the Qur'an, you can really feel it and you can really connect with it. One of my friends told me, female Qur'an recitation, it tells a different story. It's more relatable. It allows one to have a closer relationship with the text. This is a recording I found from 1933, and the reciter is Sukina Hassan.
قناة أوديون لست سكينة حسن. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والنجم إذا هوى ما ضل صاحبكم وما غوى وما ينطق عن الهوى إن هو إلا وحي يوحى علمه شديد القوى ذو مرة فاستوى وهو بالأفق الأعلى ثم دنا فتدلى فكان قاب قوسين وأدنى.
When I listened to this, I found it quite noticeable that this reciter doesn't use any echoes or sound effects that is so common to hear in the recitation of many Egyptian reciters, such as Abdul Basit, one of my favourite reciters. And when we listen to Sakina Hassan, she uses her natural voice, and we can hear the purity and the feeling of her recitation coming through. And sometimes female reciters deepen their voices and try to imitate men, but you can see that she's using her natural voice. And the most important part is that you can feel the purity and the sincerity and the feeling of her recitation coming through. And that is so much more important than whether the reciter is female or male. In verse 124 of Surah An-Nisa, it says, "Anyone, male or female, who does good deeds and is a believer will enter paradise and will not be wronged by as much as the dip in a date stone." And there's a very famous companion of the Prophet, Waraqa, and she was referred to as Al-Shahida, the martyr, by the Prophet when he was still alive. She was one of the very few people who knew the entire Qur'an by heart, and she would teach it to others. Her whole life revolved around it, and her recitations were frequent and loud, and they could be heard by those living nearby and passing by her house. So, how did we as a Muslim community decide that women should not be heard reciting in public? What type of distortion are we consuming? When there were women during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, whose Qur'an recitation was so beautiful and so loud that it could be heard echoing on the streets for men and women to appreciate and hear. It makes you wonder at the spiritual lobotomy that has taken place among us in the last centuries. Perhaps you might ask how it was possible for me to have the opportunity to recite Qur'an, given that this is something, unfortunately, that is quite frowned upon by many people. It's really shunned in many communities. Many girls and women cannot recite the Qur'an openly. Only in female-only gatherings would they be able to have that opportunity. I am lucky to have a platform in my community for the Andalus Centre. It's really important to know that the Qur'an is for everyone. When people are connected and close to the Qur'an, they can feel the beauty and pureness of it. And this is really a blessing that we can all invite into our lives and communities. May God give us the strength and wisdom to do it properly and with the right intention.